والسلام علي يوم ولدت ويوم أموت ويوم أبعث حيا.
الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله القائم على كل نفس بما كسبت، المحصي عليها كل ما اجترحت، القائل في كتابه الكريم: وأن ليس للإنسان إلا ما سعى وأن سعيه سوف يرى ثم يجزاه الجزاء الأوفى وأن إلى ربك المنتهى. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. ثم أما بعد. Brothers, there is a space inside here. Assalamu alaikum. There's a space inside here. Inside here, yeah. Jazakallah khair. We've reached verse number 14 of Surah Al-Hujurat. And as we've said before, Surah Al-Hujurat was revealed at a time after the Prophet ﷺ came back to Mecca, and when people started to come to Islam in multitudes, in large groups. We've looked at the beginning of the surah, at the group of people who would raise their voices in the mosque, where the Prophet ﷺ was. And we looked at another group that wasn't very careful when it comes to transmitting news. And we looked at another tribe that would really mock Muslims, spy on them, backbite, gossip. In today's khutbah, we have another group that came in the same year when the Prophet ﷺ came to Mecca, in the 9th year of Hijrah. It's a group of people that were known as Banu Asad, a large community, a large tribe, who came to Medina when the surah was revealed. And the attitude was a very weird attitude. جعلوا يؤذون الناس في الطريق. First of all, it's a Bedouin community. They haven't really had any sort of education as such. So فكانوا يؤذون الناس في الطريق. So they would harm people on the passageways and in the roads by throwing things, blocking ways, backbiting, gossiping. فرأى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذلك. When the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم had seen this, he said صلى الله عليه وسلم: إياكم والجلوس في الطرقات. Keep away from sitting in public spaces that allow you to see other people whenever they're coming in or coming out. Avoid sitting in public places that will put you in a position that you see everyone and allows you to really speak ill of those people. So the Prophet is literally cutting the root of this. He said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْجُلُوسَ عَلَى الطُّرُقَاتِ. Avoid sitting in public places that would really put you in the situation that allows you to backbite and to cause harm. إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْجُلُوسَ عَلَى الطُّرُقَاتِ. قالوا يا رسول الله إنما هي مجالسنا نتحدث فيها. These are the places where we said we can't escape this. We sit together, we talk. We can't escape that. We can't avoid that. The Prophet ﷺ said, فإذا أبيتم إلا المجلس فأعطوا الطريق حقه. He said, if you really have to sit in those places, then give those public places their due right. قالوا هل للطريق حق. They said, do those roads really have duties, have rights in Islam? ما حق الطريق? What is the right of a public space, of a road? And then the Prophet ﷺ started to count by educating them. said raddu salam, that you return the greeting when someone greets you. وَغَضُّ الْبَصَرِ, that you observe what your eyes have to see and what your tongue has to say. وَأَمْرٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and that you command what is good. وَنَهْيٌ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, and that you try to enjoy what is, to keep away from what is evil. So that group of people did not really have this sort of education. And actually they ended up making another mistake. The verse is saying, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. That group of people, the Bedouin, they said, we have had faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet to say to them, قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا, you haven't really had faith. وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. But what you can claim really is that you've accepted Islam outwardly, verbally. Otherwise, Iman is a very big word. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Iman did not really come to your heart yet, because it takes time. Right? This verse is teaching us really a really valuable lesson. That Islam, first of all, has degrees to it. This deen has degrees to it. The stepping point, the stepping stone, the first thing that you do is accepting Islam verbally, outwardly. But faith develops. Faith develops as we go. It's a question of action, a question of conviction that we develop with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling them that Islam is an easy word to say, but Iman is a big one. Iman is a big one. Right? It's a journey. We follow it, we trace it, and that's a question that we need to ask ourselves. The Prophet ﷺ, when he classified Islam into Islam and Iman and Ihsan, those that grading system, Iman is higher than Islam and Ihsan is higher than Islam and Iman. A Muslim needs to ask themselves, where am I? What have I done to be in that position? Or am I happy just with this being in that lowest point? This is not what Allah asks us to do. He is asking us to aspire to become in better positions with our faith. And then he defines Iman in a very unique way. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. See, you can't claim this because Iman is a big one. And then he gives us signs of faith. If you have those signs, you're good. You're doing something. You've achieved something. The Quran counts several signs of faith. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. True believers, real believers, the people who really have faith, are the ones whose hearts will tremble with awe of Allah. When they remember, when they think of Allah, that's the first sign of faith. إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. The hearts, believers are the ones whose hearts will tremble with awe of Allah when Allah's name is mentioned. Do we have this sign? That's the first one that you need to ask yourself. Before you say, I am a believer, before you say, I am a mu'min, that's a big thing. The Quran is saying, if you have this sign, then you are on the right track. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. And the real believers are the ones whose hearts and whose faith would increase when the verses of Allah are recited to them. They are not the same after hearing the Quran. They feel the depth of the experience. The Quran makes them feel different. Do you have that sign? Ask yourself. When I read the Quran, when I listen to the Quran, what happens to me? If I don't feel touched, then I really have to examine this. I really have to check this sign. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. If your faith does not increase after you hear the Quran, after you listen to the Quran, then you have an issue. You haven't really achieved that point. You haven't reached that point yet. And then the Quran says, وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. So the Quran mentions, the first one is إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. When Allah's name is mentioned, the believer's heart would tremble with awe of Allah. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. Whose faith would increase when they hear the Quran. And then the Quran tells us of the third sign. وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. And they put their trust in Allah. A simple and an easy thing to say, but really difficult to practice. Really difficult to live by. To put your trust in Allah. وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. These are the signs of believers. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling them, you can't claim this because if this is too advanced, you haven't really reached this yet. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. It takes time to arrive at this. It takes time for your heart to tremble with awe when you hear Allah's name being mentioned. It takes time for your heart to be inspired by the Quran. It takes time to really build up a deep trust in Allah. So the first thing this verse is teaching us, that we should aspire. We should ask ourselves, where am I on this ladder? We have this famous hadith. Prophet ﷺ comes and asks. He was sitting with the companions. The hadith is mentioned in Bukhari and in Muslim. فَجَاءَهُ رَجُلٌ شَدِيدُ بَيَاضِ الثِّيَابِ. As the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with his companions, a man came with a very white clothes. شَدِيدُ سَوَادِ الشَّعْرِ. And his hair was very black, very dark. لا يرى عليه أثر السفر. The first time we see him, but he doesn't look like a traveler. He should, if he's coming a long way, you could tell that he's a traveler. But the Prophet says, the narrator says, لا يعرفه منا أحد. فجلس إلى رسول الله. He came and sat to the Prophet and sat down to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. فجعل ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه. Knee to knee with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. And he said, Ya Muhammad, أخبرني عن الإسلام. Oh Muhammad, tell me about Islam. What is Islam? Then the Prophet ﷺ defined Islam in the way we do it, like the 5 pillars. أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله أن تقيم الصلاة. From prayers, zakah, hajj. And he names the 5 things that we know. And then Jibreel said, the man says, صدقت. He says, you're right. The companions, normally when someone asks a question, that means they don't know the answer. This man is telling Muhammad ﷺ the answer. He's saying, you're right. That means he knows the answer. Then he moves to ask another question. Mal Iman. So what is Iman? The Prophet ﷺ identified faith in 2 different hadiths. أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر خيره وشره.
مباركا أينما كنت وأوصاني بالصلاة